while loops. And while loops pretty much let you repeat code over and over again until either A, the condition is false, and I'll show you that in a second, or B, there's a break statement. So if we look at this code I'm looking at right now for lab 6, right? We have system.out.print, please enter a letter grade. We're reading in for a letter grade, right? And let me actually put this scanner. I'm going to create my scanner up here, all right, instead of down there. And you'll see why in a second. All right, so please enter a letter grade. String grade equals input.next. So I read in the grade, and then I'm checking for what that user put in. If they put in an invalid input, I'm going to print this out, and the program would end, right? So regardless of whatever I put in, I'm sorry, if I put in an A down here, the program ends. If I put a Z down here, which is not a valid grade, invalid grade, the program ends. But how about in the case where I don't want the program to end? I wanted to keep looping over this until a valid grade is entered. Well, I could use a while loop. That lets me loop this code over and over again. So I could do while true, right? So this program will keep running, right? Regardless, true will always be true, right? That means while true, there's never a case that true is false, right? That is a declarative statement. I have explicitly declared true. So that while loop will always run. While true, do all this. So this program would technically run indefinitely. But I want it to end, and sometimes you use that like for a web server, right? You don't want a web server to stop once somebody connects. You want it to keep running over and over again. So I'm sure there's a while true inside that web server. But instead of letting this program run indefinitely, if somebody enters in a valid grade, I want to break that while loop. Break the while loop. Break, break, and break. However, if they enter in an invalid grade, I want it to say invalid grade and then repeat, go all the way back up here and start this process over again. Okay? So if I run this, I put in an E, which is not a valid grade, invalid grade, and it repeats the loop. I put in a Z, invalid grade, repeat the loop. I put in a Y, invalid grade, repeat the loop. However, once I put a valid grade into it, it goes to the if statement. If it's true, it prints this out and then it breaks the loop. Right? So if I enter in an A, numeric value of A is 4, and it breaks the loop. It finishes it off. Okay? So it just lets you repeat code over and over again. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in depth with the slides. So while loops allows program to repeat or iterate application statements over and over again. It's based on a conditional expression similar to an if statement. That expression, so this while true, this expression up here is evaluated prior to the execution of code inside the loop. And you'll see this in a diagram on the next slide. While loops are good for when the number of iterations is unknown or non-discrete. So I don't know how many times this loop will occur. Right? Somebody could put an invalid grade until the end of time. That's their prerogative. I don't know when they're going to stop. However, it will stop once they put in a valid grade. So I want this while loop to keep going until they enter in a valid grade. Or the code needs to be executed until a certain condition is false. So until while true. So if I have something like this, instead of this while loop, let's do a much simpler one. Let's have int number equals 0, right? While number is less than 10, I want to print out the number, system.out.println number, and then I want to do number plus plus. Remember, number plus plus just adds 1 to number. So it's going to do this while loop 10 times. Number is going to go from 0 to 9. See? 0 to 9. However, once number equals 10, It's going to go back up here. It's going to evaluate this expression. Number is no longer less than 10. So it's going to stop this while loop and finish the program, okay? However, number is equal to 10 at this point. So if I print out number down here, it should equal 10. Let's say while loop is broken, number equal, and then add that. So the while loop is broken, but number does in fact equal 10. That's why the while loop broke, right? However, if you count these number up, 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way down to 9, that while loop did occur 10 times because it used 0 inclusively, okay? So it went from 0 to 9. However, once the while loop breaks, number did increment lastly. However, it's equal to 10, so it broke this while loop. And I'll show you this in a second. So again, with while loops, we go down, we check the condition. If that condition is true, it executes the statements inside the while loop and it repeats this process over and over again until this condition is false, and then it jumps outside the while loop. Once that condition is false, the while loop is finished and it goes down, okay? Here we go, while expression is true, do this until the expression above is false. If the expression above is false, the while loop ends execution. So it just keeps repeating this until this expression is false. So we go another example. Int number equals 0. While number is less than 5, system.printout number plus plus, okay? So we just keep running this over again. The first iteration, we go through the loop. Number is equal to 0. So number is less than 5. It goes down here, prints out the number plus plus. So now number equals 1. Print out the number plus plus equals 2. Print out the number plus plus equals 3. Bam. Again, goes through, number is less than 5. It is. Print out the number for number plus plus. Now number equals 5. So now the sixth iteration, the loop is actually broken and it jumps outside the while loop. That condition is now false. Number equals 5, so it will not continue that while loop. Right? Number equals 5, so the expression is now false. While loop will break. All right, so if we think about this, just take it away from programming for a second and apply it to real life. Where do we see loops in our life? Right? Where can we identify that a loop is occurring? Well, one of them is when you're lifting weights, right? So for example, bench press 135 pounds 10 times, right? You want to bench it 10 times. Well, just thinking about that process, you can see a loop, right? There are certain things you must do once, put the weights on the bar, sit on the weight bench, but then that loop occurs when you're repping out that bench, right? So a loop is occurring. And in life, we have a lot of loops, right? Now that we are in coronavirus, many of our days are in loops. But for this example, you can see that we want to repeat something over and over again, but there are other things that we only need to do once. Same thing with code. So we take this to code, we put weights on the bar, we do that one time. We sit down on the weight bench, we do that one time. And then we count our reps, execute rep, execute rep, execute rep, 10 times. Then lastly, we stand up from the weight bench, right? So there are things that you only do once, you put these on the weight bench once, but there are also things in code that you want to repeat over and over and over again. So for example, let's look at lab 4. Right, lab 4 is the subtotal and gratuity rate. We want the user to read in or to type in a subtotal gratuity rate. We read that in from the console right here. If the gratuity rate is less than 5, we say gratuity rate less than 5 would not be accepted. Then we set gratuity rate equal to 5, and then we do our calculation. So if I run this, I put in a 50 and a 15%, it's going to work correctly. If I enter a 50 and a 2.5, it's going to say gratuity rate less than 5 will not be accepted. 5 will be used instead. The gratuity is $2.5, and your total is that, right? So really simple. However, let's say we want the user to keep entering in a gratuity rate until something equal to or greater than 5 is entered. We don't want to just set it equal to 5. We want to say, hey, buddy, you're cheap. I need you to enter in a new gratuity rate, right? So instead of this if statement, let's do a while loop. While gratuity rate less than 5, right? Then we're going to say gratuity rate less than 5 would not be accepted. Please enter in another gratuity rate. Then, of course, gratuity rate equals no longer 5.0, but double.parseDouble input.next, right? We want to read in another gratuity rate. So that way, when I run this now, if I enter in 52.5, it's going to say, please enter in another gratuity rate. It's going to keep running this loop over and over again. So if I enter a 1, it's going to do it again. If I enter a 3, it's going to do it again. However, as soon as I enter in something equal to or greater than 5, this loop will finish and the program will continue executing. So if I enter in 15, the loop finishes because gratuity rate is no longer less than 5. The gratuity is 7.5. The total is 57.5. All right. So again, while loops are either broken by A, this condition is now false, or B, you have a break statement like we did. Go back. Like we did here. All right. We had all these break statements so that if these were true, we want to break outside the while loop, right? So even in this example, if I want a break statement, if gratuity rate equals 0.0, right? I want to tell the user system.out.println, you're cheap, right? And then let's say, let's just break the program, right? I'm not going to ask you again to enter in a gratuity rate. So if I run this, enter subtotal gratuity rate, I'm going to do 51. That's not going to work. Let me enter a 2. That's not going to work. When I enter in a 0, it's going to go to this if statement, print this out, and then break the while loop. I'm tired of asking you for a tip. All right. It's going to print out your cheap. The gratuity rate is 0.0, and the total is 50.0. Okay. So like I said, while loops let you just repeat code over and over again until this condition is false, or you have a break statement inside your code. Okay. There's also something called a do while loop. So instead of while loops where we look at the condition before we do the code, a do while runs the code, right? Do this while this expression is true. So what happens is a do while will run your code at least one time. However, with a while loop, if you get to the while loop and that expression is immediately false, it's going to skip over that while loop entirely, right? So if I look here, while gratuity rate is less than 5, if gratuity rate is greater than 5, it's going to skip over this while loop entirely, 50 and 15. It skips over that while loop entirely. However, if I have a do while, it's going to do this at least one time and then evaluate this expression. All right. So 50 and 15, it's going to do that regardless one time, and then I'd have to enter in 15 again, and then it's going to run. Okay. Mind you, in all my years of programming, I've never actually used a do while loop. So that's, I mean, personal preference. And depending on your problem, it can come in handy. But I've always used a while loop. And if I want to do something at least one time, I could try something else, right? I'll use a different type of loop, a for loop maybe. We'll cover that later or next time. Okay. And just to give you a diagram of this, well, this is just do this expression below. Do this until that is false, but we're going to do this at least one time. And here's the difference, right? So we have our do while. We go down, we do the statements inside the loop, and then we check the condition. Do this over and over again until this condition is false, and then we jump outside the do while. All right? Like I said, I use while loops mostly when I'm using either while or do while, when I'm deciding between the two. While loops are very powerful. They let you repeat those program statements over and over again. And like I said, in life, we have many different loops that we do without even thinking about it, right? Say, for example, when I'm changing the channel on a television, I have to press the channel up button over and over again. Or I'm on Netflix and I got to go up with the button. I'm repeating that loop until I reach a program I want to see, right? Then I stop the loop. Same thing with programming, right? I'm going to do something over and over again until a condition is false, and I'm going to finish off that loop, okay? So this diagram really demonstrates that. Do this until that condition is false, and then stop the loop, right? So within our programs, like I was showing you earlier with the labs, when users input something, an invalid statement, you don't necessarily want the program to stop, right? Because sometimes I type something in incorrectly. Maybe I didn't mean to put 1.5, I meant to put 15. Well, if the program stopped, I'd have to run that over again. And like I've told you, programs can get very large. So having to run this thing all the way over again could be time consuming. So instead, you add a while loop until the user enters in a valid input, okay? Or you want to count something. You want to count the number of reps you've done. Use a while loop, or in the future, something called a for loop, all right? So loops, they come in handy for repeating code and just doing things over and over again until a condition is false, or you hit one of those break statements, and usually that'll be another if statement of that nature. Okay? Well, that's it for today. Any questions, comments, or concerns? All right, before I let you all go,